Let me point out to you that I am wearing a bow tie tied by my own hand. This is my bow tie that has the French and American flags. You will notice that the flags are upright. Occasionally, I will tie a bow tie where they are upside down to see whether anyone's paying attention. These are upright, and you'll notice this bow tie is tight and dense, which means we have ground to cover. So first, the mission of the Lafayette Trail. What is it? And give us a progress report.
We great, Richard. The Lafayette Trail is a nonprofit established in 2019 with the mission to document, map, and mark the footsteps of Lafayette during his tour of the country in 1824-1825. We want to promote a greater understanding of Lafayette's numerous contributions to American independence and national coherence, and we do that in a variety of ways: digital resources, historic markers, web series. So we believe that all these formats combined are going to increase basically the outreach capacities of the nonprofit. So we do that in preparation for the 200th anniversary of the tour. And we are hoping that combining physical resources with those markers with digital resources on our website, thelafayettetrail.org, will make it a powerful incentive for people to learn more about this man and the legacy he left behind. And I hope we'll talk about that in depth tonight.
And tell us how many markers are out and how many in the works.
We have a commitment with a foundation in the state of New York called the William G. Pomeroy Foundation to place up to 175 official Lafayette Trail markers. So at the moment, we have approved about 40 of those markers with more than a dozen currently in the works. So, you know, it's great. The coverage is getting more steady. It's getting steadier. It's getting more distributed from New England to Mississippi recently. So, you know, one marker at a time, we're making progress, and we're making sure that those markers that I see personally as points of entry into the topic of the tour will be equally distributed around the land that Lafayette traveled during his tour, so that a maximum people will have access to it. So, you know, you see the marker, what do you do next? You go on the website and hopefully you learn more. So if you want to read a biography, if you want to read a little bit of a description of who Lafayette was or where he went during the tour, you'll have that on our website. If you're more into watching YouTube videos, you also have that with the series that we have, Follow the Frenchman. So we have a combination of resources for people.
So tell me about the idea of it. Where was this idea born and how did it grow?
It's an idea going all the way back to 2015, I suppose, when I was an exchange visitor, suppose a researcher, visiting scholar, I would say in English, I think it is, to William and Mary. I was there to study the way living history museums portray or use reenactors to portray history, and to what extent using reenactors or staging history poses a threat to the transmission of historical facts. And so I was stationed at William and Mary to use the data that I could collect out of the living history museums in that area. So Colonial Williamsburg, at that time, the Yorktown Victory Center and the Jamestown Settlement. So all of these were combined in part of my study. And I basically at the time, investigating that topic and asking a few questions, interviewing people, I started to discover that there's this Lafayette guy, that name that I'm very well aware of in France, that was widespread here, and just caught my attention. Why does he have counties named after him, so many of them? Why does he have so many streets? Why are people personifying or portraying him live? Why is there all this passion in this country? And that prompted me to learn more. And so I found out that yes, he fought with the Americans, but he came at a very young age to support the American cause. He poured his own money. So that's one reason why Lafayette and why not any other French officer during the Revolutionary War. Well, because he fought with the Americans. He pledged allegiance to projects leading to the United States. But most importantly, also found out that coming up on the 50th anniversary of the Revolution, in 1824, he came back as the last surviving major general and he toured the country. So those two parameters combined to me explain today why he was such a popular icon. So that's the beginning. 2015, I attended an annual meeting of the Friends of Lafayette in June of that year when the Hermione came back, and I just decided to learn more about this man. So it's a gradual process. I finished my master's in France. Basically, a couple years later, I interned as a junior diplomat in Boston, Massachusetts, as developing the project of a cultural trail, promoting the memory of Lafayette through his last visit to the country, with the mission to increase mutual understanding between the peoples of France and of the US. So I started the trail there. Really, if you want to see digital resources, my first map was made when I was on a diplomatic passport in Boston. And the trail itself became its own nonprofit as the Lafayette Trail Incorporated as a 501c3 in April of 2019. So this has been my full-time job ever since, and grateful every day when I wake up that I get to do that for a living. It's wonderful.
So when you were at William and Mary and you were looking at whether reenactors distort the facts, what was the conclusion of your research?
They do, because they don't have a choice. They're basically being forced to do that because of modern economics, because out there right next to them, in the case of Williamsburg, you have Busch Gardens, you have Water Country USA, you have all those parks. Let me tell you, Richard, they don't care about telling you history. They're just gonna welcome you, they're gonna get your money, and you're gonna have a great time. You're gonna have a great time for sure. But it's always a little more boring as a mission if you want to teach people, especially kids, something. Because if you're a parent and you're looking for vacation, if you tell your kid, hey, we're gonna go learn a little bit about history. If you tell them that, and then on the other side, you tell them, we're gonna go have a blast at Busch Gardens, what do you think the number one will be? So they have to adapt to that. They have to make sure that it's appealing, that people can come and have fun in those living history museums. So, you know, it's almost, I would say, bittersweet that those parks are there for those museums, because yes, they bring tons of people to the area, but I don't know to what extent their business model allows for visitors to go to those parks to translate into visitors for the living history museums. So it's a tough balance. How do you attract people to tell them the history? Because if they don't come, you don't get to tell them anything, right?
So there have been other tours of America. Washington in the 18th century, Charles Dickens in the 19th, late 19th, and then the Beatles in the 20th. None of them hit the pitch of Lafayette's farewell tour. What was it about Lafayette?
Well, what was it? I briefly touched on that issue. As he was adored by Americans because he served with the Americans very young. He took a risk. He poured his entire fortune and that of his family to support the American cause. And back then, you have no idea, and you won't have any idea for decades if it's going to be flying forever or not. So people, I think, reward him for having made that decision to support the American project. And then, of course, the fact that he came back 50 years later as the last surviving major general of the Continental Army, to me, the combination of these two facts really explains a lot of why he is such a unique icon. That's kind of the long, I would say, contextual information long term. But short term, there's a lot of short term data as well that's very relevant around the tour. The country, the 1810 and the early 1820s, the country experiences a lot of I would say the country doubts itself. The national programs have challenge. For instance, you have a financial panic in 1819 that plays a key role in Americans being, I would say, not trusting of national institutions, in particular banks. You have the compromise over the Missouri situation, the Missouri Compromise of 1820 about slavery that further divides the nation. So for a lot of Americans, the 1820s, when you talk about national politics, you have a polarizing election in 1824. People assume that it may be more divisive than anything else. And it's really a challenge for the country to produce a national icon that is going to have the capacity to unite the entire nation. The nation grows to the west. With that growth comes further domestic division, divisiveness that is totally revealed in the 1824 presidential election, US election. And we have a video of Follow the Frenchman about that, by the way, episode 5, and that explains that divisiveness. So you have Lafayette coming back, and he is really in a unique capacity to bring the nation together and to put aside those differences and together come and celebrate America. Lafayette really believed that the American Revolution was morally superior and that the institutions of the United States were also superior. And I think he put that faith in America early on and demonstrated that throughout his life. And I think that that faith that he placed, I think he's rewarded for that today, for his confidence in the American project and for having told the American people during his tour that, yes, you're going to make it. And you are leading a tendency among Western republics about the protection of the equal protection of individual rights under the law. So for Lafayette, it starts with the American Revolution, and he reaffirms that in the 1820s. If one place on earth is going to achieve the equal protection of individual rights under the law, it will be the United States that will do it first. That's the fundamental faith that he placed into America.
And some things we need to be redundant. We'll come back to that idea of Lafayette as mediator. You'll have opportunity to comment on that again. Let's talk about the mechanics a little bit about marker placement. What does it cost to erect a marker? Who erects it? Who maintains it?
So the business model that we have a partnership with the William G. Pomeroy Foundation that secures the funding for the crafting, the manufacturing, and the shipping of the sign. So we do not cover at all any installation. This is taken care of by the recipient of the marker directly, nor do we also cover the cost of maintenance. So our partnership with the William G. Pomeroy Foundation basically limits itself to producing the marker and shipping it. We don't get anything out of it, so that's why we constantly ask for people's help when we process markers as well, because that's a lot of work. We need to gather the primary source materials. We need to find a landowner that is close enough from the site that Lafayette visited. We need to obtain his or her permission, get a letter. We need to get GPS coordinates of the exact placement. All of those steps have to go one by one for every single marker. So with the diversity of landowners that this country has, private individuals, county-owned operations, states, historic sites, federal government agencies, Army, Navy, National Park Service. But diversity poses a challenge. So we have streamlined the process. It works very well. It flows very well. But of course, it is financially struggling and challenging. So, but we're making progress. I think we're moving forward. 40 is a good number for now.
The Pomeroy Foundation. Has its mission, and how did you discover it?
They have two missions really. So their founder, Bill Pomeroy, has two passions basically. So he survived blood cancer basically. He's a survivor. So that's number one of his foundation, is to help people that have been diagnosed by blood cancer as well, to help them as much as possible. And number two is historic markers. When he was a kid, he loved looking at historic markers. So his foundation combines two activities or moments that have impacted his life personally at a very intimate level. And so I think his foundation reflects that. And I think that in Lafayette's legacy, in celebrating Lafayette's legacy, I think he also sees a fulfillment of that passion for history that he has. But also, when you look at those Lafayette Trail signs, I'm happy to show you a few on screen as well. The process of the requirement of primary source makes it so when you look at one of those markers around the country, you can be absolutely convinced that the text that's on it is accurate, supported with primary source materials, and has been cross-referenced. That's very important, because primary source can be Auguste Levasseur's book. You alluded to it, but Levasseur makes mistakes. Nolan as well makes mistakes. You have Brendan as well. So all of these people make mistakes as well. And the only way you're going to be able to exclude or rule out those mistakes is by combining primary source materials together to see what is confirmed independently from each source and what is not. So that is why doing this work for years is putting us in a great position, because we have done this work of cross-referencing the data for a lot of sites around the country. So that's a surplus value that we have, and we're trying to share that as much as possible through our membership program, newsletter, markers, videos, and also on social media.
So the Foundry, where are the markers cast?
They're cast in Marietta, Ohio. So that's where all the signs come into existence. And then from beautiful Ohio, they go all over the country. So, it's a central location, basically, I guess, but that's just where it is. And, we have tracking numbers, and we talk directly with our recipients. So now we have a good time monitoring those orders and, seeing where, your marker shipped. Great. Your marker is in transit. So, when you see the amount of work it takes to create one marker, and you're able to see the progress, and you're able to track from crafting to shipping to installing, and then you can attend and do a dedication and hopefully produce an episode of Follow the Frenchman. It's very rewarding because it's a personal work, and you every single time there's a marker placed and you walk or drive by it, you can see the result of your work out there for decades. So it's a great feeling. I got to tell you, it's great.
Now, so the site for marker placement, how do you decide?
Well, combination of parameters. Again, I think one that is of utmost importance is putting it in its geographical context, so that in addition to having a paper telling you Lafayette was received at whatever, the Phoenix Tavern or the Steamboat Hotel in Natchez, Mississippi, right, on April 18th, 1825. I want to know where the Steamboat Hotel was located, don't you, Richard? So in addition to having the paper mentioning where he went, you also have to go find maps or find city directories or find all sorts of other kinds of primary source materials with different kind of information, spatial information, so that you can match the description of an event with the spatial relation, the occupation of the site by the same building. And so combining this is always my number one priority. Sometimes, unfortunately, that site is not available, or it has regulations, it's not touchable, or there's a big building built on top of it, or whatever the reason. When that is not possible, my second reaction is always to go find for the closest alternative with an easy placement, safety for the public and the cars, high visibility. So those are things I take into account before placing or solidifying a decision about the definitive location of one potential sign. So that is a long conversation for every single of these markers. That's why when you lock in one marker, regardless of its a status as a national landmark or not, you're very happy.
So the wording on the markers, who decides and what's the process?
A conversation ongoing between the recipient, us at the Lafayette Trail, to see if we have the data to support that text. So what I usually try to do is that I look at the data, because I have all this data and I try to craft a text proposal based on the requirements that the partnership program with the William G. Pomeroy Foundation and the Trail offers. So usually it's 26 or 27 characters per line, same title, Lafayette's Tour, same logo of the Lafayette Trail on top, the credits of the William G. Pomeroy Foundation at the bottom. They are two-faced. And so then we have a conversation between the Trail and the William G. Pomeroy Foundation about the final wordage to see, hey, I think it's better like that. Or sometimes I'll tell them, hey, I think this is a little, it reads better there, or it could read a little, the flow is a little better. So we have these conversations going on all the time. We try to get the input as much as possible from the recipient, because eventually the sign will be on their property. But the primary source is really the most important parameter that drives the crafting of each text proposal, for sure.
So Whitehall, New York was the first marker. How did Whitehall come to that distinction?
It's the order in which I try to get to these signs. I think at the very beginning, so you should know the William G. Pomeroy Foundation is based in New York State. Syracuse, New York. And so originally, when I contacted them, I offered them to see something, to do something about the state of New York, just the state of New York. But then I just changed my attitude and said, this is such a great match. Why don't I shoot for the stars and tell them if they want to do the entire country? So nothing for 2 months, and then one day I get a call, and yes, I absolutely would love to do it. So I couldn't believe it, obviously, but it worked out because this was the challenge, to produce a national conversation from Maine to Louisiana, regardless of the diversity of this nation and its landscapes and its forms of government, being able to create a homogenized layer of memorialization that basically creates products. We live in a material culture, so the markers are part of that, and they're going to be seen and they're going to be tweeted about. I can tell you, when we placed a marker at the house of Andrew Jackson in the past, I said to myself, okay, this is our first presidential mention. I bet you within a week or two, we're going to get a message from somebody pulling in the parking lot. Because when you go to that house, the first thing you see is the marker. I mean, it's outside, everybody sees it. But it didn't even take 24 hours. Somebody just messaged me out of the blue, hey, I saw your sign, great. So, we have more presidential mentions coming up. We have a great sign that is going to be installed in November at the house of President Madison, the father of the Constitution. It's going to be a great conversation as well, with Lafayette's visit and Madison's role in the freedom of religion, and Lafayette challenging him about slavery. So these are all topics that we're going to be able to explore. And the markers produce a moment, because you want to have a moment. And the fact that you dedicate a sign, and that sign is part of a national conversation that's growing every day, to me, it plays a big role in creating viewership and an audience. And so, one at a time, it grows.
Lafayette Trail website and the interactive map is remarkable. Can you give us a quick tutorial on that map and what all you can extract from it?
Sure, you know what I'll do? I'll show you a couple of things too. I'm going to share my screen here so that the audience can see it as well. But so this is on the trail, the LafayetteTrail.org/FTF, or Follow the Frenchman now. You can see all of our episodes. So, you can watch our latest in New Hampshire, and then up there you have all of the episodes of Follow the Frenchman. We have 7 so far, and we'll have many more. We have so many in the works, I can't even start. But the trail website itself is divided in several sections. Number one, of course, we want to make sure you follow our social media channels, and then we have a link to the latest episode. I see I have this little prompt that shows up if Julien wants to talk to you. So in this case, Julien, let me tell you, is not available to talk to anybody. So I'm going to shut it down. But you have, so the section for the YouTube videos, more episodes here. And the maps, this is just I have background in geography, GIS, integration of spatial data into web environments. So I do like to show history with maps. I think it's a great tool. It's so different compared to traditional books that I think at the moment in the 21st century have a challenge reaching out to younger generations. That's my opinion. You may not agree fully, but I think that I try to develop resources, alternative resources, to make sure that we bridge that attention, I would say, leaning, how younger people lean to get their knowledge. So it's a different format, and I'm just trying to adapt to that change. So see this map, for instance, on the right, you have a map of the Narrows in New York City in 1830s, and it shows you Fort Lafayette, okay, which is here. And on the left, I put a Google Map views. And so you can swipe left and right, and you will see the change. So the Verrazano Bridge was built on top and destroyed the Fort Lafayette. So if you swipe to the right, you'll see the fort disappears and the bridge is there. You can zoom in and they're synchronized. So we have many maps like these. So that's one example. We have a marker map as well. So if you want to see every single of our marker, you can play around. So I mentioned Andrew Jackson's markers. So here it is. And the markers are like that. They're blue, white, and red. As I said, the logo of the trail, Lafayette's tour. And then the date he visited, what he did, and the primary source material with the number on our series. So, and then you have more maps. So we have more resources, additional resources. You can click here and see the road of Lafayette that he took throughout the country. So, those are updated as soon as there's something to update, whether it's a new marker or a new episode. I invite you to check it regularly because there's a lot going on that website. You can join us as a member. You can donate. Interesting tab. So you can do a lot of things on that website. And yeah, we put a lot of work, but I think it's worth it. I think that at the end of the day, a lot of people are going to see your organization or your work through the first thing you have to offer, which is most of the time a website or a talk or a video. So that's the goal. The goal is to maintain our online presence, making sure that we can touch on that issue or the address Lafayette's tour and promote its wider understanding of its significance to Americans and to French people online. And, at the end of the day, the country is huge, and Lafayette only went to 24 states, 25 now, but it's not even half of the entire country, right? And almost. And it's challenging because people in California or younger parents or people with a new job that can't take a vacation, whatever the reason is, if you can't go see one of our signs or come to a dedication, I don't want them to be left behind. And the best way to do that is to do the homework. We create those resources, and everybody can see those resources from the comfort of their couch at home or after feeding their kids at home. Or I think it's a good way to create a viewership that makes the content of Lafayette's tour accessible to as many individuals as possible.
So your work, the spreadsheet where you list your work and your contacts is remarkable. Chuck Schwalm says it's amazing with 3 exclamation points, and I'll point out to you that exclamation points are sacred. So when you're approaching a community, is there a process? Are there particular people that you contact in order to establish connection?
Well, a couple of years ago when I went around the country documenting what Lafayette did everywhere, I always contacted historical societies and public libraries, always. And that has created to me a sustainable and I would say a reliable layer of contacts, because people in these libraries or communities, historical societies, they're here to help. They want to help. They're here to serve their community, and celebrating the history of their community is going to be in the best interest of their community and its constituents. And so that is a solid basis that I shared with organizations such as the AFL, as you pointed out. But in addition to that, I also sometimes reach out directly to the government officials, because eventually when you want to place a marker, that's the challenge with markers. When you lay a reef or you just do an event with a public official speaking, you don't mark the land. It's temporary. Just a bunch of people gathering for an hour or two, and then they're gone, and that's it. The landscape is the same as it was before everybody showed up. Now, in the case of a sign, you plant a sign that will be there for decades. It is transformative. It has a transformational impact on a piece of land. And so the fact that it's here to stay for decades brings out additional inquiries and questions from people that are in those cities. So when it comes to placing a sign, you have to get the government officials involved, because that's a decision that elected officials will make on behalf of their constituents. And so they put the word of the entire community behind their endorsement of each single marker that we place. That's why it's very challenging to do that. But you know what? In 1824-25, every town produced a committee of arrangement or a selectmen board to welcome Lafayette officially. And so what I think is striking in the process to install a marker is you see the same thing. You see the same way government officials go through their established process in order to authorize an official event that will have an impact on their community for decades. So I respect that process. Every single time we start from scratch, we explain who we are, why we do this, why Lafayette matters. And very often when you respect their process, you'll have a positive outcome. But when you want to cut through the lines, it doesn't work as much. So that's what I'm trying to do my best. I'm trying to start from scratch and explain the process, the project, and to tailor my own goals with the requirements of each local community. I think it's important.
So Lafayette visited Georgia, March 19th through March 31st, 1825. What markers are planned for Georgia?
We have only one so far. Matter of fact, it's already there. We haven't dedicated it just yet because was trying to get the governor to show up. Unfortunately, his schedule didn't allow it. So I haven't made the trip down there. We haven't scheduled anything, but our sign is in one of your former capital cities in Georgia, Milledgeville. So, when I say to people, we have a marker in Milledgeville, I'm going to Milledgeville to see the sign. This is the only one we have so far, but of course, Savannah or even close to Milledgeville, you have Sparta, you have Macon, Georgia as well. So Augusta. So these are other environments that we're going to have an interest in exploring as well. We don't want to leave them behind. There's a great story in Savannah as well. So, it just takes time. Especially cities, there's additional steps to go through when it comes to reaching out to their government officials. So I just have to be more patient with some cities. But just, find comfort in knowing that Milledgeville has already said yes, and that the house in which Lafayette slept in Milledgeville at the time already has a marker. So, it will hopefully be dedicated, I hope, soon, and we'll see what happens next. I'll let you know for sure.
So at the American Friends of Lafayette Speaker Series, February the 26th this year, you mentioned Fort Lafayette and Fort Hamilton, which you'd mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the backstory? And you mentioned there might be a marker at Fort Hamilton. And did Lafayette ever set foot on Fort Diamond, subsequently called Fort Lafayette?
He did. And it's such a great story because arguably the first building to ever, extend an official invitation, not invitation, but the first building to receive Lafayette when he returns, August 15th, 1824, is actually Fort Lafayette, because they fired a 13-gun salute to welcome him back. And I find it interesting. They did not fire a 24-gun salute. They fired a 13-gun salute, the 13 original colonies. He was a hero of the American Revolution, and they honored that in their salute to him. And so as far as Fort Lafayette, it's significant for many reasons. Number one, the salute I just mentioned. Number two, he visited there, Fort Lafayette, on September 8th, 1824. We have a marker there on the property of the United States Army. We had a great event there. We have actually an episode of Follow the Frenchman about our dedication and Lafayette's visit to Fort Lafayette on September 8th, 1824. It's being produced. So the same day he went across. So he went to the shores on the Brooklyn side, and he went to see what's now Fort Hamilton. At the time, it was just called the Narrows Fortification. But Richard, what's interesting also about the Fort Lafayette is that, have you ever wondered the origin of Lafayette's visit back to the United States for the fourth time? People say all over the place, President Monroe and Congress invited him. What's interesting also is that he indicated, before they invited him officially, he indicated his desire to come back. And I have found like a letter from January of 1824 in which Lafayette describes his idea or desire to come back. In August of 1823, there are rumors circulating in America that the Lafayette is interested in coming back. And interestingly enough, around the same time, you have that Fort Diamond, which you mentioned, being renamed Fort Lafayette. I think it's a lot of accidents at the same time. And I just think that it's just interesting how Lafayette is freed from his obligations in France. He won an election to be reelected in 1822 in the French Parliament, but he's cast out when the king organizes basically the rebalancing or restructuration of the house. And so then he has room, he has time available, and he comes back to the US at the time. And so I think it all fits together, that the boxes really just create themselves naturally. And here he is. He was originally coming back for a few months, and he ended up staying over a year. And what a grand journey that was.
So on top of that, 3 degrees of separation, here in LaGrange, there is a home. Benjamin Harvey Hill was a Confederate senator, and he had his home Bellevue here in LaGrange. From May through July 1865, after the war, he was arrested and he was incarcerated in none other than Fort Lafayette.
There you go. Yeah.
So yet another connection.
It was called the Federal Bastille. Interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
So when we went to Fort Lafayette to do the dedication, I brought my own fake key of the Bastille. I was hoping it would open us a few doors. Let me tell you, Richard, what a disappointment. We didn't go anywhere. We did not go anywhere. That key did not open anything. So disappointing.
Well, it was a great idea. Let's talk about those videos. You mentioned them. Follow the Frenchman. How did you come to that project? And there are 7 of them posted. How many more in the works?
Well, Follow the Frenchman originally was Follow the Frenchman with an A, Lafayette, or me following Lafayette. But I thought that putting it plural opened many more possibilities to exploit relevant French individuals that have a relevant connection to the site that we are finding ourselves in at the moment. So for instance, I mean, I'm just going to mention randomly Canandaigua, New York, right? Follow the Frenchman with an A would be only Lafayette going there in June of 1825. But if you put it with a plural form, then you can tap into other Frenchmen that have visited. And another one that we haven't mentioned just yet is Tocqueville. Also went to that town. So by making it plural, I think you can combine more Frenchmen. You can bring in Tocqueville sometimes, which is interesting also because he also made a tour of the country, right, in the early 1830s. But that Tocqueville man really produced the literature describing the social order in the United States, the fact that it's going to lead the world and that every society is going to lean naturally toward a Republican form of government. So he kind of does a quantitative study and analysis about America. And in Lafayette's time, with Lafayette's tour, I think it's more about the pathos, right? The emotions. So I think the country pauses and reflects on what it is, that it is making it. It's going to survive. We're going to make it as the American experiment. I'm here, Lafayette, to tell you that, yes, you're going to be okay. You're going to make it. And so from the emotions that the tour of Lafayette revealed to the work of Tocqueville a few years later that encapsulates those feelings revealed a few years prior into a book that is still a classic in American classes to this day, I think this is an interesting conversation. And so making Follow the Frenchman plural gives you those opportunities from one side to another. It doesn't have to be Tocqueville necessarily, but in this case, that's just an example I gave you. So we try, on a regular basis, we do try to organize them. Obviously, the challenge is a lot about funding each of those episodes. We're talking thousands of dollars for just one episode. It's a lot of work. If any of you are interested in supporting the production of those episodes, you go right ahead. Let me tell you, we need everybody's help to do those. And so they're usually 10 or 15 minutes long. And they try to tap into a broader topic than just Lafayette's time, right? So at Andrew Jackson's house, I went around and I talked about the divisiveness of the election of 1824, the fact that Jackson was winning in the popular vote and in the Electoral College vote as well, that he ended up losing in a House vote on February 9th, 1825. And that Lafayette was here to unite the country. So he paid a visit to every single defeated candidate. So Crawford, Clay, and Jackson at their house, not in DC, but at their house. And to me, that also falls into Lafayette's desire to preserve the Union. He wants to preserve the stability of this nation and the tradition initiated by George Washington. And so in his understanding, visiting the defeated candidates was basically telling the American people that those people were offering an alternative version for America. You did not select them, but the people that voted for them, I acknowledge me, Lafayette, going to see them, that they're a rising star in national politics, like Jackson, for instance. And I'm going to see them and pay some time. So in the case of Jackson, he made a detour to go see him. So we distribute Follow the Frenchman on YouTube. And that's it. So for now, YouTube is our main delivery channel. And so we have tremendous partners in the Daughters of the American Revolution all over the country, especially in the state of New York. Amazing. We've been supported as well in Tennessee, in New Hampshire, the Sons of the American Revolution as well. We have conversations in Virginia as well. So what I'm trying to tell you, and Richard, is that Follow the Frenchman is picking up as a great outreach tool that explores the diversity of landscapes in this country and connecting them all together as national sites with cultural history and with a man that can have the same impact in Concord, New Hampshire as he does in Natchez, Mississippi. So who else could do a better job at the 1820s? Nobody.
So let's talk about video number 7. So you hiked Mount Lafayette.
That's right.
Where is that? Is it part of the Appalachian Trail? How long did it take? Yeah. And from whence the idea?
It's in Franconia, New Hampshire. So, looking at all those newspapers, I found one on October 19th, 1824. the people of Franconia and surrounding towns decided to name a mount after the hero of the revolution, Lafayette. So what's interesting is that they picked October 19th. So here is one connection between the North and the South, between Franconia, New Hampshire, and Yorktown, Virginia, when the siege was won on that date in 1781, October 19th. And so the idea was to come up with a transversal storyline, right? A storyline that we can go from left to right, jump between the courthouse or the state house and some of our markers installed. And hiking a mountain was a great idea to do that, because you start from the base and you go all the way to the top. And what was also interesting is that at the top of Mount Lafayette, you're supposed to see all the Franconia range up there. And the closest mountain to Mount Lafayette is Mount Lincoln. So I said to myself, well, what a great connection between two abolitionists, Lafayette and Lincoln, connected forever up there at that mountain range in New Hampshire. So we tried that. It worked great. Great feedback, great remarks about that episode. We got the governor of New Hampshire as well to say a few words about that. We did that as well in Tennessee. So the hike was 8 hours. It was pretty hard. Let's be honest. It's a decent hike, and so it was 27 degrees on top of the mountain, and it was the beginning of May, I think. Yeah, beginning of May. So, we got out. It was a little cloudy, and of course, half an hour after we left the top, I turned around, and it's all blue sky. It was beautiful. But when we were up there, it was cold. It was icy, and we got 20 seconds without clouds covering, the view. So that's all I got. But let me tell you, I'll take it. It was a great hike.
So you glossed over it, but you mentioned that you met two governors, one from New Hampshire and one from Tennessee, I believe. Was that just happenstance?
No, it's just, we do those events. Like when we went to do the marker dedication at Andrew Jackson's house, it was the Andrew Jackson's birthday celebration. So the governor of Tennessee was there. You just try your chance and see if you can just not force, but try to ask a question. And, if you show up with a camera, it looks good, and you're going to get an answer. That's what happened there. I was a little more prepared in New Hampshire. We had contacts with his team. So that worked out great as well. And we do try that everywhere. Your governor in Georgia, we tried as well with his team. In Mississippi, we tried as well with the Daughters of the American Revolution in Mississippi, that are great supporters as well of our marker down there, and our feature video that we will premiere later this month with them at their state conference. Actually on my birthday, I think. It's just you try. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But one thing for sure, if you don't try, it's not going to work out.
So let's talk about Be My Guest, the Lafayette Trail newsletter. Who is John Besica?
John is our treasurer, and he's a graduate of Lafayette College. And he's also an ardent researcher about anything Lafayette related during his tour and beyond. And so John came up with the idea of creating trail tales, which are neat stories that are little known by the public, and with the mission to tell the stories to a larger audience. And so we use Be My Guest as a vehicle for his knowledge and research to be distributed around the country, and it works great. And he has a very large amount of research. We work a lot on those as well. So I share things with him. He shares things back with me. So in addition to having amazing accounting skills, he's also a great researcher. So we're a great team, and I'm grateful for his help.
So Lafayette had breakfast at 7 a.m., June 21st, 1825 in Boston with Josiah Quincy. And
Correct.
Lafayette said, "I have but one thing to regret in all my travels. It was the
dog.
loss of Quiz." Who is Quiz?
Quiz is the dog. We have actually it's a dog that actually has a connection with the state of Georgia and the sail on the boat and the Atlahama, I think. And so John has a beautiful trail tale about the future of Quiz and how Lafayette came to admit of his horrible regrets to Josiah Quincy on June 21st, 1825 at 7 in the morning during breakfast. So again, it's a conversation. How does it end up having data in Massachusetts about something that happened in Georgia? I think it's a great connection, again, between North and South that Lafayette provides, this time through the lens of a lost animal. So, the mystery, but John figured it out. So check out his trail tale and Be My Guest in one of our latest issues, and you'll find the answer to that. Be My Guest is reserved to our members, I should say. So if you're a member of the trail, you have received your credentials automatically when you signed up. If you're not a member of the trail, I highly recommend that you go become a member for $50 right now on our website. And as soon as you sign up, you will be given credentials. You can use them to log in and just look at any issues online that we have available of Be My Guest, including the one with John's tale about Quiz the dog.
So permit me a sidebar. Colonel George Bumford's wife, who gave Lafayette Quiz, that was his second wife, was Clara Baldwin Bumford, and her older half-brother was Abraham Baldwin. Baldwin moved from Connecticut to Georgia at the suggestion of Nathaniel Greene. And Abraham Baldwin subsequently became president of the University of Georgia, its first and its founder. Yet another connection.
There you go.
On February 5th, you wrote an essay, and it had to do with some of the divisiveness at the time in the country.
Yeah.
And on February the 5th, 1783, Lafayette wrote to Washington. What did Lafayette propose that was so astounding?
It's a project that would be greatly, what he calls it, it's a quote, greatly beneficial to the Black part of mankind. So I found a paper in 1825 when Lafayette is at the house of George Washington Parke Custis in Arlington, Virginia now, in which he reflects on the American Revolution and his desire to extend the blessings of the American Revolution to the entire human family. That's another quote. And that started very early on, right after the American Revolution. This is a young man, Lafayette, and he is just passionate about that issue. And he's going to talk to his founding fathers, starting with George Washington. And that letter, which he wrote on February 5th, 1783, from Cadiz, Spain, challenges Washington to join him to develop a project in what's now French Guiana to demonstrate to the founding generation that gradually freeing enslaved workers would lead to prosperity just as much as enslaving them. Basically, slavery was not necessary, and that I'm offering you, founding fathers, a plan to get rid of it so that the American Revolution can fulfill its promises to everybody. So that was the idea that Lafayette came up with and mentioned George Washington. A few months later, Washington responded to that letter, but he never addressed the project. He said, oh yes, great idea. I'll see what I can do a little later on. That's all he says really in that response. But Lafayette does not limit himself to that. He's going to go ahead and do this project himself with the help of his wife, Adrienne, for several years until basically the French Revolution makes it very hard for the environment to develop that project any longer. So that stops. But basically, Lafayette is going to challenge as well Thomas Jefferson later on, James Madison as well during the tour, because Lafayette believed that addressing the issue of basically slavery will be in the national interest of the United States and will increase greater national coherence within the Union. And so when he comes back to the tour in 1825, as I said at the beginning, the Missouri Compromise that basically admitted Maine as a free state and admitted Missouri as a slave state in exchange to maintain the balance between the two sides really revealed how the nation was torn apart on that issue. And so Lafayette himself was also, if I may, he had internal discussions as well about the attitude to take about slavery in the 1820 during the tour, basically, because on one side, he's got to preserve the legacy initiated with by George Washington as the nation's guest. He cannot go so far as to say harsh things on in the abolition of slavery, basically, because he will lose some people, and that would be a problem for fulfilling the legacy of George Washington. On the other side, there's also his knowledge that is grounded in the ideas of the Enlightenment, that slavery affects an individual. A lifelong condition of bondage affects an individual more and longer, way after the day you would abolish it. And so his understanding of that, this influence from the ideas on the Enlightenment, the dictionary, encyclopedia of Diderot and d'Alembert, Mr. Schwartz, so Condorcet, 1815, all those books show why people embrace the gradual emancipation of slavery, because they believe that freeing individuals, if you do that, you need to make sure that they're going to be ready to enjoy prepared to enjoy the rational, for the rational enjoyment of freedom. That's another quote. And so Lafayette believed that. And so when he came back during his tour, he had to tap into the long-term aspiration of the Northern abolitionists at the same time, without being seen as an immediate threat for the prosperity of some Southern economies as well. So it was a tough position for him. But I would say that for most of his life, Lafayette was in a position of outsider. He could write without any consequences for him and the country, the United States, to the founding fathers, because he was writing as an outsider. For the first time of his life, Lafayette was put in a position in which the national spotlight was on every single move he would make on a daily basis. And that limited dramatically his capacity to send messages on that issue. So you are very well aware of some things he did, especially in the southern part of the United States. When he went to Fayetteville at the time, he also made a remark about the abolition of slavery, how he supports it. You have the story about Pompey, also in Columbia, South Carolina. You have the reuniting with James Armistead Lafayette. Those are small gestures that Lafayette could take without putting in jeopardy his status as the nation's guest.
Let's talk relevance. So to the minority community today, whether it's Blacks, Hispanics, Asian Americans, Native Americans, what's the relevance of the Lafayette Trail today?
I think it's about understanding the mechanisms that also drove Lafayette, understanding his faith in America. Why did this man place his faith in this country? And reaching the conclusion that this man was convinced that the success of America would lead to the success of natural individual rights all over the world, that the two are intimately connected. And so to me, I think the Lafayette Trail and our efforts to promote a greater understanding of his legacy, the ideals he embraced and why he approached them in a certain way, to me, can help to also heal divisions that this society experiences today. The political environment that this country is experiencing right now is very similar to the divisiveness that the country saw in 1824. And Lafayette was a stabilizing presence during his entire tour in the country. And I think there are lessons to be learned from that. I think that the Franco-American Alliance and its heroes like Lafayette, I think, is home to powerful values. And I think it also has the capacity, once again, to provide stabilizing grounds in a very divided society. That is my belief, at least those are the things I'm trying to input into the Lafayette Trail. So in each of the videos that you see, I'm trying to see my own understanding of Lafayette and the forces that were at play then, how we can use them to relate to today's society and its challenges and make his legacy relevant. So you mentioned for minorities, I think that for fulfilling Lafayette's legacy, national coherence, I think it's about also equal opportunity, basically, and that fulfilling Lafayette's legacy, I think, is going to help everybody, regardless of where they come from, to feel that the American creed is available to them as well. And so that to me is the ultimate also surplus value in knowing who Lafayette is and what it stood for, because I think it can help this country move forward and define a path for everybody to thrive in.
So the bicentennial of the farewell tour is not that far away. And the Lafayette Trail has augmented its imprint, working with the Daughters of the American Revolution and the American Friends of Lafayette. What's in the offing for the big bicentennial here 4 years out?
So we're going to keep producing Follow the Frenchman. We have works, we are working to help prepare loans, like historical documents from France to the US. We're working on contacts with the executive branch of the federal government. So a few years ago, I was a part of President Macron's delegation that came to Washington, D.C. for a state visit. I want to tap into that tradition of historical bonds and friendship between our two nations. I want to create something going on with the federal government of the United States and the French Republic, whether it's with the office of President Macron or with the Secretary of State of the United States or the President's team now. We're working with Congress as well, trying to get a document done to acknowledge Lafayette's contributions to American independence and national coherence throughout his life. You may remember that in December of 1824, Lafayette was the first foreign dignitary to address a joint session of Congress. That's why there's a painting of him inside the House of Representatives. So to me, there are many pieces that can come to work with the Friends of Lafayette. Obviously, you mentioned I shared a list of extensive contacts and research materials as well, describing where Lafayette went on a daily, help to create a national conversation. And the bicentennial is going to be a year or over a year, but I think with the markers and the videos, I'm hoping that the impact of our work will last decades and certainly respond to the poses. How do you reach out to a majority of people? Because those ideals that are contained in Lafayette's legacy did to the towns in which he went or that he visited. We have to find a way so that they can be transmitted to as many people as we can. So the website, the web series, and the social media presence are ways that we have come up with to make sure that we fulfill his legacy in this way to a maximum of people.
So the hour is about to chime here. You visited LaGrange, Georgia some time back. What was the single thing that stood out in your mind coming to LaGrange, Georgia?
Well, there are several things. I mean, number one, your personal advisor for your own pursuit of happiness, Glover, I think is a great find in LaGrange as well. I think that you have an attempt in your community. I believe, Richard, you play a key role in that and establishing the alliance as well. Lafayette did not visit LaGrange, but nevertheless, you're named after one of his castles southeast of Paris. I think that gives you higher ground to create a conversation about his ideals and values. I think you can consider yourself a hotspot of Lafayette's legacy in the Southeast in general. I'm very proud to list you as a partner and count you as a friend and a director of the trail. And I believe that what struck me when I visited was the intensity, or I would say the authenticity which you as an individual and other people I've met relate to Lafayette's legacy, and how celebrating it, and again, it's my understanding, I think you consider Lafayette's legacy as a way to increase the social fabric within your diverse community. And I admire that, because to me, it's the ultimate fulfillment of Lafayette's legacy. If you limit yourself to the American Revolution, which a lot of people do, you're gonna get only a partial idea of what Lafayette's legacy fully is. Now, if you embrace a more holistic approach and you consider his entire life restore and beyond, I think you're going to coherence as well. And that's when I think our two missions dovetail, because it serves healing the divisions and creating a society in which everybody can, regardless of your background. I think it's powerful, and I think it taps into the promise of America to everybody.
So let me add just a codicil to that. Everything, including you're alluding to the fact that I might be a hotspot. I have to tell Janice that that's the first time that an allusion's been made. I'm not the hotspot in LaGrange. It's Alex Hughes who's the hotspot. But did I not hear you say? Maybe we'll have to go back and get primary source documentation that your observations of LaGrange, they were the most intelligent and most attractive people you'd ever seen. I thought I heard you say that. Maybe not. We'll go back and try to get primary source documentation. Listen, we're at the end of the hour. It has been a pleasure. Do you have any closing comments or requests of those listening?
Well, check us out. Check out our work. Make sure you don't leave behind following us on social media. If you're not a member, I hope you consider joining. And please go watch Choose Follow the Frenchman episodes. Sign up on our YouTube channel. And make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on future episodes, because trust me, in the next month or two, we're gonna have a lot more episodes going from Niagara Falls to Fort Hamilton to Natchez, Mississippi, and many more. And it's gaining traction. So presidential mentions, you'll have interviews with executives, you'll have federal government officials, you have Congress. So there's a growing conversation here, and I recommend that you follow us and join if you don't want to be basically missing out on anything. So with those two, following and joining, I think you'll be taken care of for the ride, I hope.
Julien, it's been a pleasure. Alex? you're on.
All right, we have one question that's come in here, and for those of you who want to ask a question, feel free to put that into the Q&A section, chat box. You can raise your hand. We'll let you talk. You can send smoke signals to LaGrange. However, ask us questions, and we are happy to answer those. I will start out by saying, Julien, I have watched Fall of the Frenchman, and I'm excited to hear that you have many more episodes planned. I've enjoyed watching those, and we share them a little bit on the Lafayette Alliance page, and I hope to continue doing so. Jeannie says, thank you for an excellent program, Richard and Julien, bravo. There is an anonymous question to Julien, and it says, in your opinion, Julien, what do you think would be a present day stabilizing presence like Lafayette? Who, not what. Who do you think would be a present day stabilizing presence like Lafayette?
Well, I thought a lot about, I don't know if I thought a lot about it, but, comparing somebody from the 1820s to today would be the best way to approach it anyway. But if you want me to give you a name, over the years, I've come up with a comparison. And again, take it careful, but in South Africa with Nelson Mandela a few years ago, before he passed basically, but if you compare the two men, the fact that they had an unwavering compass toward their life basically, and that both went to jail without compromising ever on the mission and what they thought was best for their own country. And their mutual embrace of national coherence for their own nation. Both of these men were international figures, and both of these men were able to craft their own understanding of their society's mechanisms and the mechanisms at play in different societies. And they were able to produce an agenda or to produce some thoughts that would be best tailored to the society that they wanted to achieve something in. In the case of Mandela, South Africa, in the case of Lafayette, having two responses, one for France and one for the US. I think in their attitude, you can see some similarities, but again, be careful with the time change between the two centuries and the geographic divide between the two. But I think this is a comparison that can be exploited, or at least can be thought about, I think.
Well, thank you. And I have a question. Do you plan on coming back to LaGrange anytime?
I would love to, absolutely. Is Charlie Joseph still a thing down there?
It is indeed. And actually, you know how you could get the governor to come to one of your signing billings is promised Charlie Joseph. He has eaten.
Yeah, so, and that really goes back to the question Richard had, like something that struck me in LaGrange. Charlie Joseph, how about that? Like I think it's 100 years old now, right? And the man expanded to a much bigger. Last time I was there, it was coming up on the 100th anniversary. I'm sure the pandemic altered a little bit the plans to do that, but
it did, and he is an
yeah, what a great place. And I would love to come back. Yeah, and if I come back, I will go to the local brewery, and I'll go to Charlie Joseph.
Good, and we'll have to take you to all the places that have Lafayette inspired dishes. There are several, and there's actually one that has opened since you've last been here. Has a French dip sandwich. We'll have to try. There is another question.
Hey, well, I'm in.
Yeah. So Joseph has a question. He says, Julien, do you have anything in the works for a Lafayette Trail sign in Charleston, South Carolina?
I'll be going there probably in October this year at some point. I do not. We have a sign in Chorral near North Carolina. We have a sign. We are in the process of hopefully having a sign soon in Camden. We have contacted Beaufort. We have contacted Edisto Island. So before you know it, you may have a few plans for Charleston itself. There's tons of data. It's not a problem. I'm sure it will require navigating some urban bureaucracy that comes with a larger city, but we have time. And I think it would be, dedication. It would be a good reason to go back to Charleston. Why would you turn that down? You have to be crazy. It's a great place. So of course, yeah, we'll have a plan there. We'll have a sign, I'm sure.
Great. Thank you, Julien. All right. make sure that we've answered everything here. Yes, yes. Jenny Coates says, yes, road trip to LaGrange. And Richard, I will help you dig up those primary sources about the validity of the beautiful, handsome, talented people in LaGrange, Georgia.
You won't find them because nobody had a recording, but I will say it again. It's a beautiful town. Richard was amazing. He's a very talented individual, and here is your primary source. Now it's being recorded, so you're safe now. Just don't delete the recording and you'll be okay.
There you go. Well, thank you, Julien, for joining us. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your efforts. And we hope to see you again soon in LaGrange, virtually, and all the sorts. So with that, we will end tonight. And,
thank you for having me.
I hope that everyone has a great, great weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Alex and Richard. And it's been a pleasure. Take care, and I'll see you soon.
You take care. Thank you.